All right. What's going on, guys? And welcome back to the ShiftEQ.Podcast with Alan K. Today's episode is how I got ripped using reverse engineering. But as always, let me give you a little description of the background and catch you up on a few of the things as to where this episode was inspired from. I've been mentioning it over the past couple of episodes. I am going to start training aggressively again starting next month, October, for my next competition in March. For those of you guys who do not know, I compete regularly in a federation called OCB. It's a natural federation, so I don't use any steroids, anything that's, I don't say illegal, but definitely things that don't mess up with your hormones. I enjoy these competitions. Pushing myself naturally is something I pride myself on. It's not that I don't have anything against anybody that does try to do steroids or testosterone, anything like that, because that's something I might be considering later on based off of my T levels just naturally declining as a man. But as of right now, I do enjoy training naturally. The intention of this episode is to show you that based on what your goals, as long as you could break it down into action, as long as you could break it down into intention, that there's a possibility for everything. For me, I went through a huge transformation last year. At the beginning of last year in March, when I decided to start getting rid of the stories that I told myself and actually start going after the things that I really wanted to do, such as running a marathon and performing in a physique competition and getting up on stage half naked in board shorts, so to speak, it's something that I never thought was possible. And I noticed that too when I try to encourage anybody else to compete. The initial thought of saying getting up on stage and competing against other people is such a far out story that people tell themselves that people don't even look into going into training for those kind of events. And what I have found is that by getting rid of that mindset, instead of saying, I can't do this, I started telling myself, well, if I could, what would that look like? And that is what got me to realize that the only thing that's stopping us from getting to those kind of accomplishments and accolades is just the stories that we tell ourselves. And when I start breaking down into all the behaviors and conditioning, I hope you guys can also see that for training for a competition or training for a marathon or something that is exquisite, especially in the physique world, or at least it pertains to your physical health, that if you break everything down into action, that it's actually really attainable. Now, before I get into all of these things, I do want to make a disclaimer. This is what I did. This is what I have proven to myself for results. This is what I have gathered. When I have worked with my coaches, we worked together on something that would work for me. And I can't stress this and encourage this enough. Hiring a coach that knows how to set your eating patterns correctly, that knows how to keep your workouts in check so that you're actually going after goals, not just doing upper body or lower body. It makes all the difference in the world. There is a saying that called the power of the dot. So the more specific you get into your goals, the more specific you get into your training, and those goals are well defined, the easier it is to progress. So I will encourage everybody by saying, hey, find a coach that works well with you, and find a coach that works with you instead of just having you say, oh, this is my program, you need to do this. That's not a coach, right? Definitely do that. Well, also with that being said, I notice when I start speaking about things like with regards to fitness, there's always some kind of a backlash. And in my experience, the fitness industry is heading in a direction where all they want to do is make you feel insecure and then start selling you these products that are gluten-free or low carb or effective carb this or high protein low this or vegan that. Keep in mind, all of these labels, all of these monikers that people attach to food are all sales pitches. That's what all they are. And when it starts talking about carbs, when I start talking about these macros and micros, Some of these things might go against the grain of what you may or may not have seen from your favorite influencer or what you've seen on YouTube. But I want you to understand there's a lot of bullshit out there that's being fed on to people. And I cannot tell you how many people have gone to me and told me what I was doing was wrong when I have the results that they wanted and they have never achieved the results that I had. Now, I'm not saying that you have to have the results to be able to speak about fitness or anything like that. But I don't know too many people who take advice from a physique that they don't want. You know, it's very equivalent to going into GNC and getting those really skinny guys that don't have any muscle mass trying to tell you that you need to take this supplement and that supplement and this supplement in order for you to get yoked. But they are not fitting that demographic at all. And as men, we are more led by example than we are by just great words and whatnot. There are also a lot of people that just constantly want to discredit everything that you say, that want to discourage you from going after your physique goals and your dreams. There's a lot of people out there who actually don't want to go after their goals, and it keeps them really hostile towards themselves. And the way you see it is by when you see other people trying to create transformations for themselves, especially in a physical realm, they will discourage you in any way, shape, or form. And the reason why I'm saying that is you can only tolerate that kind of stuff for so long. You could only try to ignore that for so long until at some point or another you ingest it and that becomes a part of your thought processes. But you need to work on shutting those people out, going after what you want, because there is this kind of a transformation is very challenging. There's a lot of lifestyle changes. There's a lot of cultural changes sometimes that you have to make, you know, and I'm not any different. I literally a year and a half ago, before I hired any coaching, before I made the decision to step up on stage, I was that guy that's doing low carb, this high carb, low carb, high carb, low carb, upper body, lower body. Oh, I got to work out my biceps. And when I look at it now, I realize that, man, what I was doing was wrong. Because, like, for example, one of the things that gets really popularized in working out is bulking, right? And everybody will just eat everything to bulk. But if you look at the most elite bodybuilders, if you look at the most elite ones, hormones or not, it doesn't matter. When they bulk, they're not eating 12,000 cheese pizzas. They're not eating all this excess of carbs. Yeah, they're loading up on carbs and they're adding a little bit more protein, but it's nothing in the essence that we try to tell ourselves or give ourselves an excuse to not hold ourselves responsible. Also, with that being said, when it comes to like cutting down, we have this weird societal thing that we have to deprive ourselves of every macro in the world just so that we can look good for 10 minutes by a pool. But again, I will always default to the most pristine physiques in the world. When they cut down, they don't do that. Yeah, we do manage water. We do manage those kind of things. We do taper down our macros. But to cause yourself to be completely deprived and starve yourself, it's not the right way. And with that being said, let's get into the episode and let's talk about reverse engineering and then talk about the 3 topics that go into this reverse engineering episode. Also, before we get into this, guys, do me a favor, go on Instagram and follow ShiftEQ.Podcast. Also with this channel, like, follow, subscribe, all those things that keep this going. Oh, and one more thing I did want to mention that goes kind of against this. So it's been a little while since I created content. It's been about 2.5, maybe 3 weeks. I do not enjoy creating content for the sake of creating content. If anytime you see me on YouTube or you see me on a podcast or see me on Instagram, it's because it's a real intention, a real purpose. I know that there is this huge notion to constantly push and make the algorithm work for you and things like that. I do not enjoy creating content for the sake of creating content. So I want you guys to know if I'm coming out with an episode, it's a real reason for doing so. And appreciate the support all the way up until now. So thank you. So what is reverse engineering and why does this matter? In the last episode, I started talking a little bit about be, do, have. In the sense that we are not a product of the stories that we tell ourselves, but rather the actions that we create into what we really want to do for ourselves, right? For example, a person isn't rich just because he has a whole bunch of money. More often than not, they've created that wealth based off of the discipline, based off of the systems that they've created for themselves, of how they put their money into certain places. The same thing happens, especially with regards to bodybuilding and creating that physique. You can't just tell yourself you're ripped and then all of a sudden you're ripped tomorrow. No, you have to eat right. You have to work out right. And you have to do those things consistently and do it in a way that motivates you to show up no matter what. Those are the things that creates results. But how we eat, how we work out, and how we keep those things consistently comes down to behaviors, actions, and our mindsets. And when it comes to our mindset, which is the most important thing, we have to be able to break these things down into action. So often and too often, I hear everybody saying, hey, I want to lose 30 pounds. But what I've noticed is that if you have a goal, right, the further distance you are currently away from that goal, the less accountable you are held to that action. So you're not going to lose 30 pounds tomorrow just by running, right? No. Losing 30 pounds and creating a 30-pound less version of you as a lifestyle creates a lot of different behaviors, actions, and conditioning. And so what reverse engineering does is it takes the result that you want, right? So let's say that 30-pound less version of yourself. Let's say you're 170 pounds. You want to get to 140 pounds. So what you got to do is identify with what that 140-pound version of yourself is doing to maintain that 140 pounds, and then retract it back to your 170-pound self and work yourself back to that result. For example, for me, when I got down to my last week of conditioning before I got to before I got to on stage, I was working out 6 times a week. I was eating 4 meals a day. I was eating proteins, carbs, and vegetables in a very finite manner, in a very specific macro level based eating. And the way I was training every single morning. But when I started my journey in that March of 2021, I wasn't eating 4 meals a day. I wasn't working out 6 times a week, and I wasn't working out regularly in mornings. So what I was doing though was eating 2 to 3 meals a day. I was working out 4 to 5 times a week, but it was the process of fine tuning those habits to get to that 6 workouts, 4 meals, and very specific workouts and very specific meals, and closing that gap is what ended up getting me to my result. On top of, cutting back the drinking, cutting back the excess of binge eating and cheat mealing. When it's interesting because when you start having a real devised work plan for yourself, the specifics for which you approach that become way more finite, and the margin of error becomes less than you were to not, opposed to if you didn't have a plan at all, which I didn't. I was very much under the notion carbs this, carb that, carb this. But then I started learning about complex carbs and how certain carbs provide micronutrients. And that's what started changing everything for me. But again, that started with the coach. But first, let's start talking about the mindset, right? When you start going after that 140-pound version of yourself, for me, going after that physique competition, I'll be real frank with you guys, I didn't believe I could do it. Right. But what I did see was the actions that it took for me to get to that level. And so what for me, sometimes, fake until you make it. What I started doing was starting to eat like someone who was competing. I started working out like someone competing. And when I finally hired a coach that got me down to these devised plans, the workouts were very specific. So instead of doing upper body and lower body, what I started doing was a push day with chest and shoulders. And I had a pull day with my bis and tris. And what started happening is that the more I started stepping into that person that was competing, the more I started identifying myself and I started mimicking those behaviors, the more that actually started becoming who I was. And so it's interesting because when I started in March of 2021 at 170 plus pounds, I just didn't know what I was doing. And all I did was mimic what I saw in the plans, what I saw in the dietary plans. And eventually what started happening is then I mentally started believing what I saw. I started finally seeing that it wasn't about getting up on stage. It was more about working out 6 times a week. It was more about eating 4 meals a day. It was more about how could I maintain these better habits and stick to that goal. And I'll be real frank with you too. There is a huge pressure when you sign up on that dotted line, like, you know what, I'm going to sign up and perform in 6 months and compete. And I'll tell you, sometimes the fear of being insignificant on stage kind of pushed me to push myself harder. And so with that being said, I am going to ask you during this, and especially when we're talking about the mindset portion of this reverse engineering episode, find out what your internal motivators are. Find out where it is you feel like you can't do something. And instead of telling yourself you can't, reverse engineer that question and say, well, if I could, what would that look like? And I'm going to constantly bring that up here in the next 2 parts of this, because that is where possibility starts happening. That is where those results that you actually want happen, but you have to believe in it first. You have to close that gap. So when it comes to these habits, when it comes to these goals, don't say you're going to lose 30 pounds. Say, I want to get to working out 6 times a week. I want to get to 4 meals a day, but also be realistic with yourself. If you're not working out 6 times a week already, or if you're not working out even twice a week already, starting to work out 6 days a week while not giving yourself any time to build that endurance is literally suicide. Do not do it. You have to be realistic with yourself. Everything that you do in contrast to your baseline, aka what you're currently doing at the moment, as long as there is a contrast and you're improving every step of the way, that is what matters. It's about creating gradual differences and then getting ahead by that way. So mindset. Another thing with mindset, like I said, I did talk about the leading versus lagging indicators, but I am going to talk about it again. Too often people say, hey, I'm going to lose 30 pounds. When instead of saying, I want to work out 6 times a week, I'm going to eat 4 good meals a day, they say, I'm going to lose 30 pounds. But if you say, hey, I'm going to work out today, I'm going to work out tomorrow, these things are really measurable. And so what I'm going to ask for you to do is, instead of saying, I want to lose 30 pounds, I'm going to encourage you to say, you're just going to make your goal about whatever the next respective action is. So let's say you decide to work out maybe 4 times this week. Make your goal about working out 4 times this week. If your goal is about setting meals, and those are the ways to get to your 30-pound less self, focus on the meals. Don't say you're going to lose 30 pounds. Say, I'm going to eat 4 square meals a day. That's how you start. And I'm not saying you have to do 4 meals. I'm not saying you have to work out 6 times. That's what worked for me. But what I'm encouraging you to do is to understand that by reformatting your goals into that of action, instead of just looking at the end goal, you'll see that it's actually way easier to get to where you want to be, because what you're doing is measurable, vice just dreaming off into what you think you want, right? Another thing with the mentality thing is plan ahead. So I am going to talk about specifically working out and eating as it changes as a behavior, but to make those as effective as possible, you have to plan ahead. So for example, for me, I work a pretty aggressive schedule, working a 9 to 5. I also have my kids that live an hour away, and I go visit them to go see their school events and things like that. And with all that being said, I never miss a meal. I never miss a workout. Why? Because I understand that anytime past 9 a.m., my schedule is booked. So the only way I can mitigate that and make that work in my favor is by working out in the mornings. Also, with that being said, when it comes to eating and you don't know what you want to eat or what you can't, I meal prep 24/7. Now, mind you, this wasn't my habit to begin with. But what I'm saying is, as long as you could plan a day or 2 ahead and you understand, hey, this is going to be my schedule. This is the only way I'm going to be fitting into a workout. This is the only way I'm going to be able to eat healthy. Make that work for you. It's an active decision. You do not say, oh, I didn't plan for this. I didn't plan for that. Because at the end of the day, you are accountable for everything that you do. And so let's say you didn't have enough time to plan. Well, take that as a learning point and do something better the next day. Now, if you decide to rest on your laurels and not do anything about it and go back to the same default that you already have, then the reality is you probably don't want to get to where you want to be. I can't stress this enough. A lot of people tell themselves that they want to be happy. A lot of people tell themselves they want to get to their goals. But when you look at their actions, when you look at what they're doing and what they're telling themselves or how they're conducting themselves or constantly telling themselves they're going to lose 30 pounds but not doing anything about it, you'll realize a lot of people just tell themselves stories without actually actively going after what they want. And so what I'm encouraging you to do is find every excuse at why you can't do something, why you can't eat better, why you can't work out more consistently, and then reframe that, reverse engineer that into saying, well, if I could, what would that look like? Again, for me, what worked for me is working out in the morning, 5, 6 a.m. Also, along with fat loss benefits, I've talked about in a previous clip. Go to my Instagram page, ShiftEQ.Podcast. I talk about why that does enhance more fat burning as a general whole. Also, with that being said, like I said, I do meal prep. That's what works for me. When I meal prep, I know exactly what I'm eating. I don't need any excuse. There's only a McDonald's around. There's only this, and this. And with that being said too, you can reformat your meals regardless of what restaurant you go to, and you can make it healthier than what you would get. A lot of people, what they default to is because only fast food's available, like let's say only McDonald's is available. Well, I guess I have to get a Big Mac meal. I guess I have to supersize fries. I guess I have to get a shake because I'm at McDonald's anyways. Do not get into what I call that avalanche mindset. Find a way to make it work for you and find yourself accountable. Because look, at McDonald's, you could get like a grilled chicken sandwich and you could just take the chicken and then you could find ways to make it a lettuce wrap or something, right? There's always a better way. But you have to ask yourself, if it's possible, what would that look like? And with that being said, yep, that is the mentality part. So the second part I'm going to talk about is the diet. So what I have learned is that a lot of people have this deprivation mindset with regards to diet or a surplus diet. So like I talked about earlier before, when it comes to cutting down, people, what they do is they just starve themselves and not even look into what would be the better way to approach what they're currently doing. Or what they do is when they want to bulk, they just put themselves in their surplus. For me, what worked for me and how I got to that 4 meals a day and eating the correct macros and micros was by first identifying what I'm currently doing. A lot of people, what I've noticed when it comes to eating, they just go through the motions. They pick up whatever breakfast on the way to work. They eat whatever cafeteria food's right next to them when they go to lunch. And the dinner, they just default to some kind of fast food because they're tired to cook anything. If you plan just a little bit further ahead, if you finally identify with what you're currently used to eating, it's a lot easier to make modifications than it is to just completely overhaul and neglect what you're currently doing and trying to fit into this mold. Reverse engineering, when it comes to your habits and behaviors, it identifies what you're currently doing. And it's a very pivotal point because let's say you're eating 1 meal a day. There's some people that only eat 1,100 calories and I don't fucking get it. But people that only eat 1,100 calories and all of a sudden you realize what the proper way to nourish yourself is eating 3,000. Some people will just go 1,100 to 3,000 real quick. But if your body isn't used to consuming that much food, if your body isn't used to adjusting to that many things, not only your body, but you mentally, you emotionally, we have attachments to our food, especially with some of these foods that are processed. They do cause so many chemicals to change in our body that we sometimes develop a dependency on certain foods. You have to identify them. You have to understand, hey, what are you currently doing? So when it comes to reverse engineering and it comes to your eating, you have to identify what you're currently doing and then compartmentalize that into understanding, holy shit, I'm eating breakfast and then I'm eating 1 hour later and I'm snacking an hour and a half later. And that's what's not making me eat properly by the evening. You have to identify what you're currently doing. And for me, what I realized is that my breakfast was fine. I was eating a lot of the same things. But when it came to lunch and everything, I was snacking a lot, eating a lot of nuts because I was told nuts were healthy, which they are, but only in moderation. I was consuming a lot of protein shakes because protein's good. And they are in the proper moderation. But when I started realizing, hey, I actually need to get down to a fundamental way of eating. I need to start not piggybacking, but formulating what I'm currently doing and adjust that to there. That's when I eventually started getting to eating better. That's when I started having a fuller control of meals. That's when I started realizing, wait, I can't jeopardize my results by allowing variables to come in my life. For example, if I don't know there's a good healthy food place around, I will meal prep. And then all of a sudden that started going to more meal prepping. Now, you can go to certain restaurants that do present themselves in a way that you can track your macros. Like, for example, if I'm on the road for work and I can't grocery shop or anything like that, I'll try to find places like Chipotle where you can literally see there's rice, there's meat, there's vegetables, things that you can pick and choose and modify. And you can do that in most restaurants as well. What I would highly recommend, outside of hiring the coach to get you to your macros, break down your meals into carbs, proteins, and vegetables. And now also keep in mind that not all proteins are made equally, right? I know there's going to probably come with a little bit of flack, but when it comes to like vegan sources of protein or animal styles of protein, one of the key ingredients, one of the key proteins that's missing in a lot of vegetarian and vegan sources of protein is leucine. Leucine enhances a lot of muscle growth, and that's usually found in carnivorous sources of meat. Carnivorous source, I was trying to sound way too smart with that. But in sources of animal products or animal proteins, that's where leucine is really abundant in. So what I would recommend is, if you're not vegan, again, I don't know, this is only going based on what I do. A lot of your proteins should be lean. They shouldn't be breaded. And they should be chickens, beefs, turkeys, things like that. Carbs, I would honestly recommend just rices, oatmeals, things like that. Again, this has just worked for me. And that is that for that. So the next part we're going to talk about is the working out with regards to how I got to my goal. When you are training for a physique competition, you're not just up there for a lot of muscle and less body fat. I showed up in both my competitions and probably the lowest body fat of anybody that was there. The very first one, for sure was. Maybe this last one, maybe the second or third least amount of body fat. But with that being said, I didn't even place in the open in my last one. And so when it comes to a physique competition, when it comes to getting ready for those kind of things, what they care more about is how broad your shoulders are and how slim your waist is. And what they do is you create that V taper, that physique that is sought after with regards to that dynamic. What I found out by training for something like that, by training for very specifics, that working out becomes a lot more intentional. It's not just upper body. How does my upper chest feel, and lower body, whatever. When you have plans that are set for, hey, 4 sets of 10 by doing at the highest resistance you possibly can. Next week, do 3 sets of 15 while doing just a medium amount of pressure. By oscillating that difference in energy, that difference in effort, your muscles respond significantly differently. And it's interesting for me because one of the things I used to emphasize when I would work out without a coach, I would try more than anything else to try to get my arms bigger than anything. I always try to do extra bicep curls or extra this, and this. But what I have found out is that when I approach my body as a total workout, like my entire body needs to be worked out. It's not just the bicep that needs to be enhanced. If I just push my body in other elements, like in bench pressing, shoulder pressing, tricep this, or whatever it is, my overall body just grows together organically. So what I would encourage you guys to do when it comes to this working out and changing what you do, A, get a coach, but B, start being way more intentional in your workouts. To go along with that too, another thing that really helped keep the tempo, that keep my focus, was having a timer or a stopwatch. Apple Watch is literally, it's 2 buttons away from creating a timer, and what does it interrupt your music, and it definitely puts you focused on the right set. Also, with that being said, create a playlist that you enjoy, have workout clothes that you like wearing, have a pre-workout that you enjoy tasting. by doing more things that encourage you to work out, you'll be able to work out more formidably. Another thing with the working out, find a gym where you have zero excuses to miss. For me, I have a 24-hour fitness membership. It's not the best gym in the world, but it has everything you need. And everywhere I travel to, Phoenix, Vegas, everywhere in California, there's a 24-hour fitness literally within 5 square miles of wherever the hell you go. And with that being said, I have zero excuses to miss out on the gym no matter what. So find a way that encourages that to be a regular habit, so that not only are you going to go to the gym when you're motivated, but most importantly, go when you're not motivated, because you have no excuses. Hold yourself accountable. All right. Woo. So that's the 3 things that I really wanted to cover real quick, is the mindset, the diet, and the working out. I cannot emphasize more on the coach that you have to get. And the very last thing I'm going to talk about, this is very pivotal. Not the most important, but it is very pivotal. One of the challenges that I go through on a daily basis right now is muscle dysmorphia. I talked about this on my IG, but I do need to bring this up again. I spent the greater portion of the last 2 years slimming down for 2 competitions. So I constantly saw myself getting absolutely shredded, getting into single percent body fat percentage. And like I said, the greater portion of 2 years was spent seeing myself lean down and seeing what they call as dick skin shredded in my abs, veins just popping, everything. And in my opinion, I don't think that's very sustainable, especially with how much water I had to cut out, everything like that. And right now, I'm probably at 10, 11% body fat. I still have my abs. I still look lean. But because I spent so much time mentally visualizing that picture that I see in the mirror, that image that I saw on stage, it's challenging sometimes to not look down on my physique now, because I'm nowhere near as chiseled as I was then, despite what the fact I may or may not look like compared to the regular population. And why am I bringing this up? Because certain things, certain insecurities we feel are completely cured by getting this dream physique. But what I have learned, that although going after your physique and achieving those results are absolutely grand, and you should be very, very accomplished in achieving that, insecurities, moments of feeling insignificant or not being enough, start more up here than it does here. And if you don't work on the mental game and the emotional game that comes with this transformation, that comes with not feeling enough or insignificant, or thinking that you have to default to a better physique to actually be something, if you don't work on those things mentally, no matter what kind of a physique you get, no matter if you become professional in the bodybuilding world or anything like that, it doesn't matter, because all of that pales in comparison to the mental game that you have to overcome about yourself. So what I would encourage you to do is not only go after these goals, reverse engineer to where you want to be so that you can be where you want to be, but also have emphasis and place emphasis on why you want those results to begin with, and why you think that's going to finally get you to where you want to be. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. I hope you guys and like this. And what's funny about this, guys, if you guys saw the preview clip on Instagram, you'd realize I'm wearing something completely different. And this is definitely not what I was talking about on there. But unfortunately, that episode got deleted in some dynamic shape or form. I need a PR guy or an electronic guy or whatever. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Like, follow, subscribe. And until next time, dose.